about collaborative problem solving. If you're on Twitter and you're technology-enabled, if you want a more technology-enabled experience, you can follow me at Waterhouse. I'll be sending links out as we go. So if you're doing that, it should be fun. So while we're on the topic of work, I've got to tell you a bit about where I work. This place, IDEO, we're a design consultancy. We've got a long history in designing products, things like the first mouse for Apple and the first laptop for good computers. But as we grew up, we've been applying our human-centered design approach to ever more complex problems and helping companies create new opportunities through new offers to markets and new markets themselves. Through the design of not just products, but new service experiences, new brands, and new businesses. But today I'm here to talk to you about how a handful of companies are beginning to work in new ways that I think are starting to challenge our traditional notion of how work gets done and of how traditional organizations are set up. And I think what those organizations are doing begins to point to some of the limitations of how we get stuff done. For example, in today's knowledge-based economy, you really are as good or as bad as the people you hire. And you're as good or as bad as, with innovation being such a key lever for growth, for avoiding disruption, we really are as good or as bad as their innate creativity and your ability to tap into their collective wisdom and insight. And with the pace of change ever increasing, as we've just heard, you're as good or as bad, or you're as agile as your organizational structure, your existing processes, and your existing way of getting stuff done. But there's another approach, and I'm not going to talk about some new creativity technique or some new process. What I'm going to talk about is really about a philosophy of opening up beyond your organizational boundaries, of finding ways to collaborate not just with your employees, but with your customers, with your suppliers, and even with your competition. What I'm talking about is called open innovation. It's a term coined by a guy called Henry Chesbrough. And it's a philosophy that underpinning it that says that we can find ideas that are better beyond our kind of four walls of our companies than perhaps from just looking within. The idea of open innovation isn't all that new, however, so you might wonder what all the fuss is all about. When coming up with a design for the Acropolis in ancient Athens in Greece, they actually did an architectural competition. They opened it up to the citizens of Athens to find the best design for this particular building. But it's thanks to technology that we're able to use this idea of open innovation in a radically new way these days. It's enabling us to collaborate not just beyond organizational silos, but across geography, across skill sets, across different ways of thinking. So here's a more modern example. In 2009, Fiat, for their concept car, crowdsourced the design for this car. It's the world's first completely crowdsourced car. And they got about 160 countries to participate, 11,000 participants, and about the same number of ideas to come up with this final solution. Here's another example. Does anyone know what this is? So this is a game called Fold It. It's really interesting. Anyone can basically play this game. You can download it. It's a game that enables gamers to manipulate molecular structures according to certain scientific criteria. And by doing this just the other day, just a couple of weeks ago, they managed to solve a problem that's baffled scientists for 10 years. And they did it in 10 days. And that was to come up with a specific enzyme that may prove the key to curing AIDS. So at IDEO, we're really inspired by some of these trends, and we recently created our own open innovation business. You may wonder why. Well, this is a picture of one of our project spaces. That project space, although we have 600 smart people around the world working on different offices with a really diverse range of skill sets, we definitely don't have the world's best talent in our project spaces. Right? So we can hold about 5 or 6 people typically in project space. We started to wonder, could we create a network of 50,000 smart creative people and tap into them to enable us to solve human-centered design issues and create solutions to those problems. We wondered what kind of impact we could have and what it would feel like to manage a network like that. Well, this is OpenIDEO. This is actually a screenshot from OpenIDEO.com, which you can go and play around on. Anyone can create a profile and tackle some of the challenges that we're doing in the open there. We set this up last year. Essentially, it's the front face of our open innovation business. We catalyze communities to help solve problems, whether in the open for social or environmental issues, or internally inside our clients' organizations to solve their specific problems. You can check this out, as I said, at www.openideo.com. We've got a challenge running right now for Amnesty International that's focused on human rights, in particular looking at the issues of legal detention and how to support people who are at threat from that particular problem. This is a slide that shows a range of some of the different challenges we've run over the last year. These are the social challenges that we've been running as kind of one part of our business. Challenges always have a sponsor, someone who's really serious about creating some kind of impact in the world. That's part of the incentive, I think, really why people get involved in these challenges. We've got a network of about 20,000 creative people from around the world. They're not all designers, they come from all walks of life to take part in these challenges. Challenges always start with a question, a kind of call to arms, and that's really kind of the hook that brings people in. Not everybody wants to take part in all of these different areas, but we've tackled things from everything from challenging, creating solutions for maternal health, to looking at how to increase the number of bone marrow donors on the National Registry, through to issues of education. I'm going to switch it up now and play a short animation that just succinctly describes how the platform works.
For a while now, IDEO designers have been keen to put the best bits of the creative process online and invite everyone to join in. OpenIDEO is a global community that will draw on your optimism, inspiration, ideas and opinions to solve problems together for the collective social good. Each challenge starts with a big question, something to get all of us thinking. Next comes the inspiration phase, in which we all post inspiring things that we've seen out there that might help us solve the big question. The more visual the posts, the better. Images, videos and stories will all help to get everyone going. After inspiring one another, it's time to flex our creative muscles in the concepting phase. How would you solve this problem? Post your solution and show everyone how you plan to make it a reality. If someone else's idea sparks something for you, you can build on it. OpenIDEO was designed with this way of working in mind. This is where you get to collaborate with other people and where the magic really happens. Once concepts are fully formed, they're put through the evaluation phase. This process is exactly as it sounds. You rate and comment on the concepts that you believe will best solve the problem, according to the given criteria. The concepts that rise to the top in the evaluation phase win, with the winning idea being available for development by the challenge sponsor. Your participation in each phase, plus how much you've collaborated with others, all add up to your design quotient, or DQ for short, which you can choose to publicise or keep private. It offers you feedback and recognition. And because we're all good at different parts of the creative process, we'll all have slightly different DQs. Just like in all good brainstorming sessions, we're going for quantity as well as quality. The more you add, collaborate and critique in any phase, the bigger DQ you'll rack up. The DQ will become a badge of honour for community members over time. In a nutshell, we've created an open online tool that takes you through the creative process. It's highly visual, collaborative, generates feedback, and most importantly, it's fun to use. OpenIDEO offers its community inspiration and recognition. The site will be as good as its input, and we're looking forward to seeing what it becomes. OpenIDEO, an open platform for innovation where we create better together.
Cool, so that's kind of how the platform works. Let me take you through one of the examples of how we've used it recently. This is a challenge that just finished up this year. It's for Unilever, the consumer goods company, and a non-profit called What's Up. We have probably the coolest acronym you've ever seen. It stands for Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor. So we launched a project and we ran a challenge to basically tackle this question. How can we improve sanitation, better manage human waste in low-income urban communities? Let me give you a little bit of background to that problem. There are currently about 1 billion people without adequate access to in-home sanitation. So we set about really trying to understand what kind of new opportunities and what kind of new, whether they're new businesses or new products or services, could we create to begin to tackle this problem and begin to chip away at it. We started looking at a place called Kumasi in Ghana. It's a city of about 2.5 million people. About less than 20% of those people actually have access to in-home sanitation. Their other options are that they often have to walk long, dangerous distances to a public toilet. As you can see, actually costs a fair amount to use. Or worse, they're forced to use other options such as open defecation. So we started the challenge, as you heard from the video, with this space called inspiration. Rather than jumping to ideas straight away, we're actually trying to learn about the problem at hand. So it's kind of an educational process in a way. We're looking for inspirations like examples that may be from adjacent markets. What can we learn from camping toilets? What can we learn from music festivals, from public toilets in those settings, which if any of you have ever used them, get pretty disgusting pretty quickly. We're also looking for inspiration from on the ground. The great thing about having a network of about 180 countries is that we actually can find people that might be in those geographies or places like it that can report back and tell us what it's actually like in those places. We often actually send teams into the field like we did this time. And one of the really interesting things we learned was that it's not purely a functional problem that we're trying to fix here. Of course, there's the really important health aspects of it. But by looking at things like how people use refrigerators, which in a place like Kumasi where it's incredibly hot, just having a cool drink is a great thing to have. But it also represents a status symbol. Having a refrigerator is something that sets a pride around it. In the same way, we started to think, what if we could create a product or a service that would actually have a sense of ownership and a sense of pride? By doing so, create greater advocacy for it. In a challenge like this, we typically get hundreds of inspirations, and they help us understand where the opportunities are to innovate. So the next thing we do is we take all that rich inspiration, and we actually, you might be surprised to hear, actually get in a physical room and get all that great stuff and try and figure out where the patterns are, where are the themes that are emerging, and where are the opportunity areas to actually innovate. The other nice thing about this is that when you're trying to manage a network of that many people, it's kind of like organized chaos, and it's a very organic kind of process. So we have various methods like these themes that we put out there for people to brainstorm. They can download brainstorm kits and they often run, organized by Twitter, tweet storms. It's a kind of new term to me, but it's fascinating what people will do and actually take these individual areas and run several brainstorms around it and then put those ideas back up on the platform. It's a kind of a way in which we can sort of break down this bigger problem into smaller bite-sized chunks. In order to help make the connection between sort of emergent, nascent ideas stronger, we built collaboration tools into the platform like this one. This is called the collaboration map, and you can basically take any node, or whether it's a story, or these green things are the concepts, the yellow ones are the actual inspirations and stories, and you can see those opportunity areas that I just showed you. You can take any of those and build off them to create an idea. So it's ultimately about giving people as much inspiration, jumping off points, to come up with new ideas. The nice thing about this, I think, as well, is it tells a story about how this process isn't about the winning person at the end of the challenge. It's about how everybody, actually, how that individual idea was made up of hundreds of different connections. I feel like it sort of evolves to get there. So with these kinds of problems, we actually usually end up with a spread of different solutions at the end because there's really no sort of silver bullet for tackling them. This is actually a prototype that's been field tested in Ghana by Unilever and the WhatsApp team. I think they've just done 1,000 of these in 1,000 homes, and they're about to try and do 10,000. But in order to tell you about how this is actually going, I'm going to hand you over to the Clean team, who are actually the people now running this business in Kumasi, who've been hired locally and are actually doing some wonderful things.
Basically is to provide household toilets for people who have no toilets in their homes. And we have workers who go in to manage it for them. They do collect the used up cartridges and replace it with unused ones. And at the end of the month, the people will pay for the service rendered.
Has made a lot of difference. I don't have to go and queue again. I'm free. Nobody will come and knock when I'm there. You can't just go there and go in. You need to pay and then join a queue. When I feel like going to toilet, I just open it and go. I don't need to go outside.
In the night, it becomes dangerous going out because anything can happen to you on the way. And with the toilet in the house, I think one is safe.
It's clean. It's really, really clean.
The one that was there was very, very, very bad. It smelled bad to us.
It doesn't give you the smell. And I thought that's all that is important.
And this one, it is our own, so it is always green.
I feel the cost is moderate as compared with what I used to pay previously.
If you compare the public one to this one, this is very cheap.
I'm happy for getting the toilet in my house.
So, I guess you might be wondering, why is that approach a better way of working? Why is that a better approach of innovating? Well, one of the more obvious ways that this tends to get associated with crowdsourcing open innovation is that it can save time. I think there's something about this quote from Unilever where they said the three of us have spent the last 9 months seeking innovations in sanitation, trying to catalogue all that's out there so they could really ultimately be as innovative as possible and learn from what's already been tried. They said within 2 weeks the OpenIDEO community had surfaced everything it took us nearly a year to find. It's kind of an interesting statistic and way of looking at it. But how else? I mean, obviously learning faster, but gaining global insight, gaining insight from places that you may not already be actually, may not be existing markets for you, but maybe actually create insights to create new opportunities in that area. One of the ways that's often overlooked with this kind of approach, some efforts within the sort of crowdsourcing space or open innovation tend to be kind of experiments. They're like, well, let's just look for some ideas and then move on. You forget actually that's an amazing opportunity to create a community around your brand, around you, what you're actually looking into. And so, in a way, that's actually creating advocates, not just for issue areas, but for solutions that you might be creating. One of the things that really surprised us about OpenIDEO is that obviously we're looking to the sponsors to actually use these ideas and make some good happen. But we've started to notice the community are actually starting to write to us and send us their YouTube videos of them actually creating real services out in the world, which is kind of mind-blowing, but also really inspiring. Finally, it's just really inspiring and refreshing to work like this. It kind of constantly, every day, is sort of an inspiring way of working. So I guess my question for you is really, how can an approach like open innovation help you, whether it's creating new opportunities, exploring new markets, whether it's recruiting new talent, reducing cost in innovative ways, or help your staff reconnect to purpose? Finally, I hope you've seen how traditional ways of innovating, traditional ways of solving problems has certain limitations, and how approaches like open innovation can get beyond those limitations. If you're interested in sort of what we're learning so far in terms of how you do this stuff, here's some of the principles we've been learning. We've been applying this not just to social issues, but to internal issues within organizations, helping those brands do the same thing that we've tried to do ourselves. I hope you're as inspired as I am about these kinds of trainings, and I look forward to seeing what kind of experiments you try yourselves. Thank you.
I think we have time for a couple questions.
Sure. Kevin, yeah.
So what do you do about the intellectual property?
That's a great question. So what I've been talking about specifically here is how the open social platform that we've created works. For every community that we create, we have to think how the incentives are structured, how intellectual property is dealt with, and it's different for different networks, right? But with OpenIDEO.com, it's essentially, if you're familiar with Creative Commons, it's a very similar kind of license to, in fact, we're looking at how we could perhaps adopt Creative Commons. Essentially, we're sharing, by you submitting your concept to the platform, you're sharing your idea with the sponsor and with everyone else within the community to further the purpose, that social purpose that we're trying to solve. So whether it's like coming up with, trying to tackle the issue of creating low-cost educational tools and services, the solutions that get created are then shared amongst the community. Does that make sense? It's kind of, so essentially Creative Commons, very similar approach.
So the same question, but slightly differently asked. Who owns, as well as that example which you gave?
Yeah.
Who owns the intellectual property?
So in that sense, there's sort of different, the original ideas remain with the participants, but are shared with the sponsor, so shared with Unilever and WhatsApp to create some kind of, to further that particular goal. So that participant could still go away and create an alternative innovation, if you like, of that particular thing, or even go and create that thing themselves as well, whether in the same market or for a different market. I think that the reason why it may seem surprising it works in that way with this particular context, but I think because the challenges are all for social good, social and environmental good, we've never had a problem with it so far. I think because people understand that their contribution. So actually, a really interesting example is we did a challenge with Sony and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And in that instance, we actually had one winning idea at the end. Sony now implementing that as iPhone app to essentially create a service for micro-volunteering, so that they would do small amounts of, small tasks to create some kind of social good in there, wherever they live. Now, the guy who actually came up with that original idea, his idea, of course, was built on everyone else's contributions, but we had a conversation with him and said, would you like to get involved in making this happen? And he said, look, I'm a consultant, I've got a day job, I love being able to contribute in these small ways, but I don't want to give up that job to run this startup over here. So we always try and look for those opportunities, because ultimately that person's got some great creativity and great idea that we want to leverage that as well. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yeah, lady at the back.
How much do those toilets cost, and how much are they paying for them to come pick up the...
So it doesn't cost them anything to actually to buy the toilet in the first place. They're purely paying for the service. I believe it costs them something like the equivalent of $10 a month, which, as you heard, which may sound like a lot, but actually it's actually less than using the toilets, and also when you think about the the increased benefit, incremental benefit to the people, it's a massive increase.
How much does it cost to manufacture the toilet?
I don't know, actually, to confess. I can find out for you. Yeah.
Have you tried this also with just private company ideas to improve, company costs or revenues?
Yeah, we have. We've used it with a car company. We've used it with an airline, and actually a couple of different kinds of organisations, smaller, larger. So I think we're learning heaps about how that works. We're finding it actually a really interesting way of. Some companies are seeing it as a really great kind of employee engagement strategy. I think one of the things that we're learning is that, kind of like the point I made earlier, that you can't think of this as a one-off thing. You have to have a longer-term strategy for how it's going to be, actually rolled out and how the community will continue to survive, so that people's ideas aren't just kind of a flash in the pan. Well, here's my idea, and like this sort of suggestion box I showed at the beginning. That it actually begins to create a way of re-engaging your employees.